David walked slowly through the alien jungle. The trees were tall, glowing faintly in the thick fog. The air was cold, and strange sounds echoed all around him. He had come here to explore, to collect samples, and report back, but something had changed. He stopped walking. There it was, again, a sound, a soft cry. High-pitched and full of fear. It didn't sound human, but it didn't sound like an animal either. David turned off his scanner and listened carefully. The cry came again. Clearer now. Help, please. Help my mom, the voice said weakly. His heart started to race. Someone needed help. He moved quickly, pushing past vines and glowing flowers. The cry was leading him deeper into the unknown part of the jungle. He had no map for this area. Everything here was wild and untouched. He knew it could be dangerous. But the voice sounded like a child, and David had a rule: he never left anyone behind. After a few minutes, he saw something move behind a tree. He raised his light. A small figure stepped out. It was a Gurlan alien girl. She had soft purple skin, light blue eyes, and long white hair that shone under the jungle light. She looked no older than 10. She was barefoot and shivering, her hands trembling. She looked at David and whispered, "Please, help. My mother is trapped in the forest." David knelt down slowly. "Where is she?" he asked. The girl pointed into the dark trees behind her. "Follow me, human," she said, and turned around. David hesitated for a moment, then followed her as they moved. David noticed deep claw marks on the trees. He also saw bones, old bones of animals, and maybe more. This place is haunted, he thought. He kept his hand near his sidearm, just in case. The girl kept looking back to make sure he was still there. She didn't speak much, just kept moving quickly through narrow paths. "Who are you?" David asked softly. "I'm Alari," she said, "my mother. She's caught in a hunter's snare." David frowned. He knew poachers sometimes came to alien planets to trap rare species, but to leave a child behind like this? It made him angry. Soon they reached a clearing. There in the center was a large trap, sharp metal spikes, wires, and blinking lights. Inside the trap was Alari's mother. She was much taller than her daughter, with the same white hair and purple skin. Her body was wrapped in metal wires, and sharp hooks dug into her arms and legs. She was bleeding, her breaths slow and painful. Alari ran to her and held her hand, tears falling from her eyes. "Mom, I brought help," she whispered. The mother opened her eyes slowly and looked at David. Her voice was soft. "You're human?" she said weakly. David nodded. "I'm here to help." He examined the trap carefully. It was advanced. Someone knew exactly how to capture this species. The device had sensors, small lasers, and pressure locks. If he pulled the wrong wire, it could kill her. He opened his toolkit and took a deep breath. "You need to stay back," he told Alari. She stepped away, but her eyes never left her mother. David worked quickly, but carefully. Every second mattered. He removed one lock, then another, but then a red light blinked on the trap. A signal. Someone's been alerted. David whispered. "They're coming," Alari said, her voice shaking. David's hands moved faster. Sweat on his face, he finally pulled the last wire, and the trap unlocked. The metal arms retracted. A mother fell into his arms. He caught her gently. "We have to go," he said, suddenly, in the distance. A loud growl echoed through the forest. It was deep, angry, and close. Something was hunting them now. David picked up the injured mother and nodded to Alari. "Lead the way." They ran, dodging trees and jumping over roots. David could feel the heavy breathing of the creature behind them, but he didn't stop. He was not going to let a child lose her mother. Not tonight, not ever. David followed Alari as she guided him through a narrow path between thick alien trees. Her small feet moved quickly over the soft moss. He carried her mother in his arms. careful not to let her wounds touch the branches or rocks. The alien woman was still breathing, but her body felt colder with each step. Alari kept looking back at her mother, worry growing in her eyes. David whispered, "Don't worry. We'll find a safe place." But he wasn't sure himself. They were deep inside the forest now, and something was following them. Suddenly, they reached a rocky slope that opened to a wide valley. Alari stopped, pointing down below. "There's a cave just beyond that tree with the red leaves." David saw it too, a small opening hidden beneath thick vines. It was their only chance to rest and treat the mother's wounds. But just as they were about to climb down, the ground shook. A low growl came from behind them. David turned sharply, holding the alien mother close. From the shadows came a mechanical creature. It looked like a spider, but twice as big. Its legs were made of black metal. Red lights blinked from its eyes. On its back were nets, chains, and sharp hooks. This wasn't an animal, it was a hunter drone. It scanned them, and a red light beamed onto Alari's mother's body. Target locked. David moved fast, sliding down the slope with the alien mother in his arms. Alari jumped after him, and the drone chased them down the rocks. David ran for the cave, his boots sliding on loose dirt. The drone fired a net, but it missed and hit a tree instead. They reached the cave just in time. David kicked the vines shut, and everything went dark. Inside the cave, it was quiet, except for the sound of their breathing. David gently laid the mother on the ground and pulled out his medkit. He used a spray to stop the bleeding and wrapped her wounds with soft cloth. Alari held her mother's hand, whispering in her own language. The woman opened her eyes for a moment, just enough to see her daughter safe. Then she closed them again. Breathing slowly, "She's stable, but weak," David said. "She needs rest." Alari looked up at him, her eyes full of fear and gratitude. "You saved her," she whispered. "No other humans would have done that." David smiled gently. "I'm not like other humans." Then he asked, "Why were you out there alone?" Alari hesitated, then spoke. "My people. We used to live near the rivers, but hunters came. They took many of us." She pointed to her mother. "She was a guardian. She tried to protect us." David listened carefully, realizing this wasn't just one snare. This was a war. Who set that trap? He asked. "Poachers," she answered. "They come from the sky. They sell our kind in dark markets." David clenched his fists. He had heard of illegal alien trade before, but never seen it like this. These weren't just animals. They were intelligent beings, with families, with pain. "We have to stop them," he said, more to himself than anyone else. Suddenly, sharp sound echoed from outside. The vines covering the entrance began to move. David pulled Alari close and readied his weapon. But instead of the hunter drone, a small metal orb floated in, blinking and scanning. David grabbed it midair and crushed it with a rock. "A scout," he said. "They know where we are." "They couldn't stay in the cave for long." David looked at Alari. "We need to move before they send more." She nodded, tears still shining in her eyes. David tore pieces from his coat and made a stretcher. He placed the alien mother gently on it and tied it with ropes. Then he handed one end to Alari. "We'll carry her together." The girl took the rope with trembling hands, but there was strength in her eyes too. Together, they stepped out into the open, into danger once more. The forest was darker now, and the sounds were louder. Every rustle felt like a trap, every shadow like an enemy. But David had made a promise to himself, and now to them. He would not let them be hunted. As they moved deeper into the jungle, Alari spoke again. "There's an old human station, not far. Maybe it still works?" David raised his brow. "A human station?" "Here," she nodded. "From before, when humans used to explore this world," David's hope returned. Maybe the station had a signal. Maybe a way out. Maybe even weapons. But first, They had to survive the path ahead. The red eyes of the hunter drone blinked once again, watching them from above the trees. It had seen them leave, and now it called for more. The hunt had just begun. The forest around them had changed. The air felt heavier, thicker, almost alive. David could hear every step, every breath, even his own heartbeat. He held the front of the stretcher tightly while Alari carried the back. Her mother lay silent. Wrapped in cloth, still weak but breathing, the jungle made no sound now. Even the insects were quiet. That silence was dangerous. It meant something was near. Watching, "Don't stop," David whispered, eyes scanning the trees. Alari nodded without a word. She didn't need to speak. She felt it too. The feeling of being hunted. A cold wind blew through the trees, and with it came the sound. Click, click, click. Metal scraping against bark. David looked up and spotted a dark shape jumping from branch to branch. It moved fast, almost invisible. Another drone. He asked aloud. Alari shook her head. No. Something worse. They moved faster, the stretcher bumping over roots and rocks. Alari pointed to a stream ahead, crossed the water. David followed her, stepping into the shallow river. Cold water splashed up to their knees. They kept moving. But behind them, the sound grew louder. Click, click, click. Something mechanical was chasing them, but it was more than a machine. It was smart, fast, and hungry for them. Once across the stream, Alari led him to a patch of tall, glowing grass. She bent low and whispered, "We hide here." David hesitated, then carefully placed the stretcher down. They lay flat under the thick blades of grass. The world turned blue from the plant's soft glow. Everything was still again. A moment later, the creature stepped into the clearing. It was tall, twice the size of a human with armor that shimmered like liquid metal. Its eyes glowed red beneath a helmet. Its arms had weapons built into them, one a claw, the other a net launcher. It was a hunter, not a drone, and it was alive. The hunter looked around, sniffed the air, then scanned the ground with a red beam. David held his breath. So did Alari. Even the wounded mother didn't make a sound. The hunter stepped closer, just a few feet from them now. David's fingers gripped his small laser blade. If it found them, he would fight. But Alari gently touched his arm. "Don't move." Her eyes said. The hunter paused, then turned away. It walked back toward the trees, clicking as it vanished into the fog. They waited several minutes before breathing again. "That was not a machine," David whispered. "That thing's alive," Alari nodded. "They work with the poachers, but some are worse. They hunt for sport." David shook his head in disbelief. "Why hunt children and mothers?" "They think it's fun," Alari said, "and they get paid." They picked up the stretcher again and continued through the forest. Their legs were tired, and the path was harder now. Thorns scratched their arms, and giant roots blocked their way. But they kept moving. Every now and then, they saw signs of the hunter's footprints. Claw marks, broken branches. David checked his scanner. Still no signal to call his ship. The area was jammed, or worse, watched. "We have to find that station soon," David muttered. Alari agreed. "It's in the west, past the cliffs." David remembered seeing cliffs on his map. Not far, if they could reach high ground. Maybe the signal would return, but time was running out. The hunter would come back with more. Suddenly, a sound buzzed in the air like wings. A small drone flew out from behind a tree. Blinking blue, it saw them, scanned their faces, and turned red. David pulled out his sidearm and shot it down with one clean blast. The drone exploded in sparks and smoke, but it had already sent a signal. David grabbed the stretcher. "We run." This time, they didn't hide. They moved fast, pushing through thick branches, dodging roots behind them. The clicking returned faster now. Alari's breathing grew heavy, but she didn't stop. They were almost there. Finally, they reached the base of the cliffs. David looked up, tall and steep. "But climbable there," Alari said, pointing to a narrow path winding up the rocks. He nodded. "Go." They climbed, slowly and carefully. Every step brought them higher, away from the hunters below. At the top, David set down the stretcher and looked out. The forest stretched far into the distance, glowing under the alien sky. Then he saw a small building hidden in the trees to the west. A broken antenna still stood on top. "That's the station," he said. "We're close." Behind them, something climbed the cliff wall with terrifying speed. The red eyes of the hunter appeared. David turned, weapon raised, ready to protect them again. This time, he would not run. David stood firm at the edge of the cliff. The red eyes of the hunter glowed in the shadows behind him. It climbed like a spider, fast and silent. David aimed his weapon and fired. The shot hit the hunter's shoulder. Sparks flew, but it didn't stop. It leaped, claws ready to strike. David dove to the side. Landing hard on the rock, Alari screamed as the hunter slammed down where he had been. The alien mother stirred, her eyes flickering open for just a second. David rolled and fired again, this time at the cliff wall above. Rocks fell, crashing onto the hunter. It was buried, at least for now. "We need to move," David said, breathing hard. He helped Alari lift the stretcher again, and they crossed the narrow cliff top. Ahead of them stood the old research station, hidden behind twisted trees. The building was covered in moss, vines, and glowing alien fungus. It looked forgotten. Lost to time, but David saw the antenna still standing. "Barely. We're close," he whispered. As they reached the station's broken door, Alari stopped. "There's another way inside," she said. "My mother brought me here once." Before the poachers came, David followed her around the side, where a small crack in the stone wall led to a tunnel. It was dark, but warm, and the walls were smooth and marked with carvings. "Your people made this?" David asked. Alari nodded. "Long ago, when humans and my kind were allies, inside the tunnel." The air felt different, calm and ancient. The light from Alari's hand glow lit up symbols on the walls. David saw carvings of humans standing beside tall alien figures. They shared tools, food, and even laughter. "This was a place of peace," David said softly. Alari whispered. "It was a sacred path, only used in times of danger." They followed the tunnel deeper, until they reached a hidden chamber. In the center was a pool of clear, glowing water. Alari knelt beside it, dipped her fingers in, and touched her mother's forehead. The water glowed brighter, and her mother's breathing eased. "She's healing," Alari said. "The water has memory." David looked around, amazed. How did this place get forgotten? "Poachers destroyed the surface, burned the old records," Alari replied. "But this path survived underground, hidden by the trees." David felt a deep respect for this place. He understood now this wasn't just a rescue mission. This was a chance to rebuild something long lost. Suddenly, a soft beep echoed in the chamber. David checked his scanner, had a weak signal. He walked toward a corner of the room where metal wires connected to a panel. It still worked. He adjusted the frequency, boosted the power, and finally got a connection. A message, flash signal lock. 15%. It was enough to send a distress call. He typed quickly. "Human explorer under attack, rescuing native civilians. Need evac." At marked location, the signal sent, but the device sparked and went dark. That was all he could do for now. He turned back to Alari, who was feeding her. "Mother glowing drops from a leaf," David smiled. "You're brave." Alari shook her head. "I'm just her daughter." "No," David said. "You're her hope." Just then, the ground shook slightly. A deep rumble echoed through the tunnel. David grabbed his weapon. "They're here." Alari helped him move the stretcher to the back of the chamber. Then she pushed open a secret door made of rock and hidden in the wall. Beyond it was a narrow bridge over a deep chasm. On the other side, light glowed from above another. Exit. As they crossed, the rumble grew louder. David looked back and saw a shadow appear in the tunnel. The hunter had survived. It moved slower now, damaged but still deadly. It growled. A sound between a machine and a beast. David handed Alari the front rope of the stretcher. "Go ahead," he said. "I'll stop it here." "No," Alari said firmly, "we don't leave you." But David stepped back, aimed his weapon, and waited. The hunter charged. David fired. Again and again, hitting its chest and face. The hunter staggered. Sparks flying from its joints, but still it moved. Then, just as it leaped, the old bridge cracked. The stone broke beneath the hunter's weight. It fell into the chasm, vanishing into darkness. David stood at the edge, breathing hard. Alari ran back and hugged him, tears in her eyes. "You saved us again," she whispered. David nodded. "Let's get out of here." They climbed out through the upper exit. Finally stepping into open air, the sky was turning deep purple, stars appearing above. The signal tower stood just ahead, rising from the mossy building. David checked his scanner, signal strength rising. Rescue was coming. Alari's mother opened her eyes again. This time, longer. She looked at David and smiled faintly. "Thank you, human," she whispered. David smiled back. "Rest now. You're safe." But deep in the jungle below, more red eyes blinked to life. The hunt wasn't over, not yet. The tower stood tall against the darkening sky. Its rusty frame creaked in the wind. David led Alari and her mother toward it, every step slow and careful. The stretcher bounced gently over soft moss and broken stone. Above them, stars began. 2 apple-cold distant lights in the alien sky. The jungle behind them was still. But David knew better. That silence wasn't peace. It was the calm before another storm. They reached the base of the tower, where old machines and crates lay forgotten. Alari helped David lay her mother down on a soft patch of ground. The alien woman was awake now, weak but aware. She looked at her daughter and then at David. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft and shaky. David nodded. "We're not safe yet." He climbed the steps of the tower carefully, testing each one. Some were broken, others barely held his weight. At the top, he reached the control panel, covered in dust and vines. He wiped it clean and powered it on. The screen flickered, then lit up. Signal strength 41%. He boosted the emergency beacon and sent a new message. Evac needed urgently. Life forms under threat. Tracking devices detected armed hostiles nearby. He watched the signal send, then locked the tower's frequency to stay open. Help would come, but maybe not soon enough. As he came down, he saw Alari crouched near her mother, feeding her more of the glowing leaf medicine. The mother smiled faintly, her fingers brushing Alari's cheek. David joined them and sat quietly for a moment. He felt tired, but he couldn't rest yet. He had a feeling the hunters weren't done. "We need to prepare," he said. "This might be our last chance to stop them." Alari stood up, her face firm. "What can we do?" David pointed to the crates around the base of the tower. "Those are old research supplies, maybe weapons, maybe traps." Together, they searched the crates, opening one after another. Inside, they found motion sensors, electric nets, old laser cutters, and signal jammers. David smiled. "It's not much, but it'll work." They spent the next hour setting up traps around the tower. David placed sensors on trees, covered nets under fallen leaves, and wired alarms to branches. Alari helped without fear, learning quickly. Her hands moved like someone who had lived through too much too young. She was a survivor now, just like her mother, just like David. Then the first alarm went off. A loud beep echoed through the trees. David looked at his scanner movement. 50 meters away. They're coming, he said, standing up and holding his blaster. Alari stayed close to her mother, a small dagger in her hand. She wasn't going to run again. Not tonight. The first hunter stepped out from the trees. Its armor was darker than before, covered in forest dust and scars. Behind it came two more smaller, but just as deadly. They didn't speak, didn't pause, they simply moved forward. Weapons ready. One stepped into a trap and was instantly caught in a charged net. It screamed and thrashed, sending sparks into the air. Another tripped a motion sensor, triggering a burst of gas that blinded its vision. David fired, hitting it in the leg, making it fall. But the leader, the biggest one, dodged everything, moving like smoke through the trees. It rushed forward, slamming into David and sending him flying. David hit the ground hard, his weapon falling from his hand. The hunter raised a blade, aiming for his chest. But Alari screamed and threw her dagger. Hitting the hunter in the shoulder, it turned to face her, stepping forward with rage in its eyes. David rolled, grabbed a metal pipe, and swung it into the back of the hunter's head. The helmet cracked and the hunter staggered. Before it could rise, the alien mother, still weak, reached out and pressed her hand to the earth. The ground beneath the hunter glowed. A pulse of energy surged up, lifting the hunter into the air and slamming it against a tree. It hit the ground, unmoving. Alari ran to her mother, helping her sit back down. The mother smiled, her eyes glowing. Softly, Guardian's gift, she whispered. David stood up, covered in dirt and blood. He checked the area. No more movement. The traps had worked, and the hunters were down, but for how long? Then, in the sky above, a soft humming sound began. A light appeared, small at first, then larger. It was a human dropship, gliding down through the night. David raised his hand and fired a signal flare. The ship turned toward them and lowered. Its ramp rescue had arrived. David helped carry the alien mother into the ship. Alari held her mother's hand tightly, refusing to let go, inside the ship. Warm lights and safe walls surrounded them. For the first time, David let himself breathe fully. They were safe for now, but as the ship rose into the sky, David looked down at the burning jungle. He knew the hunters weren't finished, and this world had more secrets to reveal. Asterisk. The dropship's engines roared as it lifted from the jungle floor. Inside, the soft hum of machinery was a welcome change from the sounds of fear. David sat near the back, beside Alari and her mother. The alien woman rested, her eyes closed, breathing steady now. Alari leaned against David, her small hand clutching his jacket tightly. She was tired, but she wouldn't sleep yet. Not until she knew they were far, far away from the hunters. The ship shook slightly as it passed through a storm cloud. Lightning flashed outside the windows, casting strange shadows on the walls. David stared out silently, his mind replaying everything: the snare, the drones, the ancient tunnel, the final fight at the tower. So much had happened in one night, and yet it felt like a lifetime. Alari's voice broke the silence. Will they follow us? David looked at her, then at the pilot's control screen. They won't reach this ship, he said. Not with the speed we're going. Pot, in his heart, he wasn't sure. Some enemies didn't give up easily. Suddenly, the pilot's voice echoed from the front. Sir, we have a problem. David stood up and walked to the cockpit. What is it? There's a signal tracking us, the pilot said, pointing to a blinking light. A hunter beacon must have been planted on one of us. David's stomach dropped. They're tracking us. Even now, he rushed back and quickly scanned. Everyone, the scanner beeped when it passed over the alien mother's leg. There, hidden under her skin, was a small black device barely the size of a fingernail. Alari gasped. They marked her. David nodded. It's how they found us. Again and again, he looked at the pilot. Turnaround is not an option. We have to remove it now. The pilot hesitated. We're midair. David didn't blink. I'll do it myself. He pulled out his field kit and took a sterilized blade. Alari's eyes widened. Will it hurt her? David knelt beside the mother. I'll be careful. He gave her a light sedative. Then carefully made a small cut. The black chip blinked once and buzzed. David grabbed it with tweezers and dropped it into a sealed jar. Immediately, the blinking on the pilot's screen stopped. They've lost us, the pilot confirmed. David sighed. Good. He tossed the jar into a disposal unit and sealed the hatch tight. Now we just need to get off this planet. But then, the ship jolted hard. An explosion rocked the back wall, and alarms screamed. The pilot shouted, "Missile lock!" Hold on. Another blast hit the rear wing, and the ship spun wildly. David grabbed Alari and shielded her. The alien mother slid against the floor, but was still strapped down. The ship tilted downward. Smoke filling the cabin, crash landing. The pilot yelled, "Brace yourselves." The dropship slammed into the side of a rocky hill. Metal groaned and bent as it skidded along the ground. After what felt like forever, the ship came to a stop. Sparks flew from broken panels and flames crackled outside. David pushed himself up, bleeding from a cut on his forehead. Alari. He called. "I'm okay," she said weakly, crawling from under debris. He rushed to her and checked her quickly. Then he moved to the mother, still breathing, but unconscious again. He turned to the pilot, who was pinned under broken metal. "I'm alive," the pilot groaned, "but I can't move." David looked out through the shattered side window. In the distance, shadows moved between trees. "They're coming," he whispered. Even without the tracker, the hunters had followed. The crash, maybe they had guessed. Maybe they just never gave up. It didn't matter now. They had to escape on foot this time. David grabbed emergency supplies, packed a small medkit, and cut the stretcher free. Alari helped without needing to be asked. They lifted her mother again and stepped into the smoky jungle behind them. The ship burned brighter, smoke rising into the night sky like a flare. It was only a matter of time. Alari led him through a narrow, rocky path. "This way," she said. "There's a canyon up ahead." And after that, an old sky station my people used to use it to send messages into orbit. David nodded. "Let's hope it still works." They hurried through trees and over rocks, the ground shaking under their steps. Behind them, the hunters came quiet, deadly, determined, but David had learned their tricks now. He placed sound grenades in their path and false scent markers to confuse them. For every step forward, he made it harder for them to follow. At last, they reached the edge of the canyon. Across the gap stood a tall structure, half broken, but still standing, an old sky station. Its antenna still pointed to the stars. David smiled. "We made it." But the canyon was wide, and the only bridge was a single beam of metal. "We have to cross one by one," he said. David went first. Carrying the alien mother, the beam wobbled but held. He reached the other side and turned back for Alari. She stepped onto the beam, 1 foot at a time. Slow but steady. Suddenly, a roar came from behind. One of the hunters had caught up. It leaped onto the beam, chasing Alari. She screamed. Slipping slightly, "Jump!" David shouted, holding out his arms. Alari jumped. David caught her and pulled her close. The hunter tried to leap after her but missed. It fell into the canyon, roaring until it disappeared into the darkness below. They made it. They were alive, but the final fight was still waiting. David held Alari tightly as they both caught their breath. The sky station loomed above them, its long antenna pointing into the star-filled sky. The jungle was far behind now. Only faint growls and distant fire still echoed. The hunters were gone, or at least too far to catch them now. But David didn't relax. Not until Alari's mother was safe. Not until the call for help reached someone who could finish this fight for good. They carried the injured mother up the tower steps. The metal creaked under their weight, rust flaking beneath their boots. At the top, they found an old control room, dusty, cracked, but not dead. A glowing panel still hummed with weak energy. David sat her down gently, then connected his scanner to the station console. The screen blinked, then lit up with faint light. Signal boost possible. The screen read, "Do it," David whispered, hands moving quickly across the keys. Below them, the jungle seemed quiet again. But David knew better. He knew silence often came before pain. Still, he kept working. Eyes locked on the screen. Finally, the signal flashed. Green transmission sent. A full emergency beacon blasted out across the sky. Every satellite in orbit would hear it. Help was coming. Alari stood beside her mother, brushing her white hair gently. The alien woman opened her eyes, tired but calm. "You're safe now," Alari said softly. The mother looked at David and gave a small nod. "You brought her back," she whispered. David knelt beside them. "She saved you," he said. "I only followed her." For a moment, they were quiet. 3 lives connected by something deeper than language. Not blood, but trust. Then a loud rumble shook the tower. David rushed to the edge and looked down. A ship was descending from the clouds, sleek, fast, and armed. A rescue cruiser from Earth Command. They had heard the signal as the cruiser landed beside the tower. Soldiers in black armor rushed out. One of them spotted David and raised a hand. "Are you the one who sent the beacon?" David nodded. 3 survivors, 1 injured, 2 mobile. Medics ran up the steps and lifted Alari's mother onto a hover stretcher. They scanned her, nodded, and moved fast. "She'll live," one of them said. "She's strong," Alari held David's hand as they walked toward the ship. She looked back at the tower, the jungle, the sky full of stars. "Will we ever come back here?" she asked. David looked down at her. "Maybe," he said. "But next time, we won't be running." Inside the cruiser, everything was bright, clean, and calm. Alari's mother was placed in a medical pod, healing already. David sat beside the window, watching the alien forest disappear below. It felt strange to leave so quickly. So much pain still rested in the soil below. So many others might still be hiding, still being hunted when they reached orbit. Earth's command officers met them on the station. David explained everything what he saw, what he learned, what he fought. They listened closely, faces grim. "We've known about poaching rings on outer planets," one officer said. "But this proves they're operating on a much larger scale." David placed the shattered hunter chip and a scan of the traps on the table. "There are families being hunted like animals," he said. "That ends now," the officers agreed. And within hours, teams were sent to secure the jungle and track the hunter's base. David had done more than rescue 2 lives he had exposed. An entire criminal operation. Later, in the medical bay, Alari sat beside her mother, who now rested inside a glowing pod. David entered quietly, carrying a small bag. Inside it was the crystal her mother had worn around her neck, a memory stone. David handed it to Alari. "Your mother dropped this in the tower," he said. Alari took it, and as she held it, the crystal glowed. A soft hum filled the room, and images flickered in the air, memories of her mother's childhood. Her people's songs and their lost villages. Tears filled Alari's eyes. But she smiled. "She will heal," she said, "and we will remember." As David turned to leave, Alari stopped him. "Will you stay?" she asked. David paused, then sat beside her. For a little while, he said, "There's still more to do." In the days that followed, news of David's mission spread across colonies and space stations. He was called a hero, though he never used that word for himself. He said it belonged to Alariand, to her mother. Us. People began calling the jungle the forest of the saved. And Earth Command promised to protect it, rebuild it, and defend those who lived there. Before leaving the station, Alari ran to David and hugged him tightly. "You're part of our story now," she said. "You're part of our family, David." Smiled, holding her gently. "Take care of your mother," he whispered. "And keep that courage," as she walked back to the med bay. David turned and stepped onto the ship, waiting for him. His mission was complete, but something told him this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something much bigger, something human, something more.